The single scripture reading today comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 1 through 17. Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me, and I in them, bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear the fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. Word of God, word of life.
Hello. I'm so glad I see all these loving, familiar faces that I feel more comfortable doing this during you guys are my service. I feel like this is my community, my service. Although it was really exciting to be at other services because they all have a different energy, this is, I don't know, I feel like you're my people. So I'm gonna today share my own personal story. It is a little bit crazy, it's long, but God started calling me at a really young age, and I always knew that. And so I want to start by saying again what we just heard from John 15:4. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me, and I in them, bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. How many of you have a green thumb? Well, that's such a special gift. I'm really into plants lately, and I'm trying to not let them die. And I realized that when you buy a plant, you actually have to take care of it, right? You have to water it, or sometimes you can't. You don't want to water it too much, but you don't want to water it too little. It has to be in the sun, or you can't be outside when it's hot. It's so many things. There are so many images from the Bible about growth and plants. The seed that is sown, faith like a mustard seed. You reap what you sow. All of these amazing gardening ideas. And it's really this logical help that we can get from the Bible. Today we hear about a vine. God says, I am the vine. Jesus says, I am the vine. And if we remain in the vine, if we're planted in that vine, what comes from the vine? With all of the sun and love and water that it needs, one vine can produce a lot of grapes. Now I hear all the time, well, what can one person do? I'm only one person. Well, it's really not about what you can do. It's about what God can do through you if you are willing to follow the call. Whatever it is that you are called to do. One vine can produce a lot of grapes. We are called to go into the world and bear fruit. Is that always easy? No. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is it painful? Yes. Growth sometimes is painful. What do you have to do when a tree needs to be pruned? You have to take off all the dead stuff. We all have a lot of dead stuff that we carry around with us that makes us feel comfortable, because if we take it off, we'll feel exposed. But guess what? That is the only way that we can continue to grow into the most fruitful thing that we can become. My story starts in a little town in Pennsylvania. I was a Lutheran kid growing up. I went to church. I did it all. I was in the youth group. I went to church camp. I did it all. And I always felt connected for sure, and I felt like I belonged in the church, but I felt like there was something more. I needed to go somewhere. I needed to get out. I needed to experience the world, and I didn't know why or where that was coming from, but I felt this deep thing from the time I was a little girl. Well, when I was a little girl, my mom was a single mom. I was the youngest of 3 girls, and my mom made a bold decision. Now, I was a wild child that my mom had, and my mom was more reserved and quiet. She didn't talk a lot about her faith, but she lived it in a way that was just very obvious. And so that her light, you could feel the warmth of her light that shone from her. So in the 80s, my mom, not a bold person per se, made a bold decision. And that was to go to seminary as a woman in the 80s. She was one of the first women in the Lutheran seminary to go. Now, she didn't completely become a pastor, but she went through the entire seminary. She became an associate in ministry, and she worked in the church then for the next 30 years. So I actually was the tag-along, because it was just my mom and me. And I sat in this front row, and I would watch her do communion and deliver sermons, and I knew that I belonged there, but I knew also that I was called somewhere. So I got to see my mom do her ministry, and I knew that I was called to ministry, but I didn't know what that would look like. But my mom, and one of the things that we did do a lot of, is we went to go see these bands called Captive Free. This organization called Lutheran Youth Encounter back then became Youth Encounter. When I was growing up, I would go see these bands. And they were Christian bands, and they were cool. And they played cool music, and it was a little bit different than my little church, my little tiny church in Pennsylvania. And I thought to myself, that is something I can do. And so for the first time in my life, I was like, oh, they sing, they do puppet shows, they do youth ministry. I was made for that. So my first calling as a kid, I thought, I want to do that. So as I'm applying for colleges, I'm also applying to this ministry to travel for a year. Well, I did my audition cassette tape, sang into the boombox. I sent it all in, and I'm waiting for all the answers. And I get accepted to a few different colleges, and I'm preparing my college years, depending on what's going to happen. And then I also get the letter back from this organization. And it says, "Dear Abby, we really think that you have wonderful gifts for ministry, but this is not the year that you will be accepted to travel with this music ministry team." I was crushed. I was 18 years old. I was like, I was going to do something for you, God, or I really felt like I was called to do something, and they said no. I really thought I was called to do it. God's timing is not always our timing. Sometimes we need to grow before we can do something. And so the next year, I would have to experience something that would change the course of my life. See, if I had gone on that year, I wouldn't have gone to college and been involved with the ministry, Lutheran ministry that I was involved in, and I wouldn't have gone on a trip for 2 weeks to Nicaragua. So at 19 years old, after my freshman year of college, I end up going to Nicaragua. Nicaragua this is the early 90s. So through the 80s, it was war-torn. It was very dangerous and difficult. And I'm going in the early 90s. I had never seen poverty so great from my American perspective, except for on TV, and then it doesn't really make the same impact. I got to spend 2 weeks with the Lutheran Church of Nicaragua, and I would stay in people's homes at home visits. And they would literally, I would have food, they would prepare food and give us food, and sometimes there was one bowl, and I was given the one bowl to eat out of. It was such intense poverty that I kept thinking, why is this okay? Why is the world like this? Why did we let this happen? And what am I supposed to do about it? I have to do something about it. Now, you know, when you're 19, you think you can do everything. You can think you can change the world. Well, unfortunately, I really believed that. I didn't know that it was actually going to be God doing it through me. But I knew I had to do something. But what do you do at 19? How does one person make a difference? So I decided at that time I would learn Spanish because I have to finish college. I'm going to do I can figure it out in the future. I'm going to change the world in the future, but right now I have to learn Spanish because at least that kind of hits this whole hemisphere. So I start majoring in Spanish as well as theater. And as I am preparing for all of that, I get another call from the same ministry that said no to me the first time. And they said, we really want you to come back and we want you to be here this year. And if I hadn't gone to Nicaragua, if they hadn't said no to me first, I wouldn't have had that experience. Now I get to go travel for a year, and I get to tell everybody about that experience that I had in Nicaragua. I get to follow the dream that I knew God had called me to do. And guess what? I meet a 23-year-old guy named JJ. And if I had not gone that year, I wouldn't meet him. And I wouldn't meet the partner that was crazy enough to go with me for the next years of a really crazy journey. I didn't know how it would manifest. God had a lot of work to do on me. God had to pull a lot of ugly branches off of me. JJ and I decided to get married after I had one condition for him. I said that I will marry you if you come to Nicaragua with me because I want to live in Latin America someday. Like, I really feel called to do that. So he came to Nicaragua with me. And he only came, he says, he'll tell you, I went to get the girl. He had no interest in ministry he was a youth minister, but he had no interest in that country or traveling or that mission trip. He had never done it before. But he went to get the girl. But in the process, God changed his heart too. And from that point on, we knew we would do something together. We get married, we move to Southern California, we get out of the small towns, we are excited, we've got palm trees, we can go to the beach, and he works in a church, we have a church family. Life is good in Southern California in our young 20s, right? Or mid-20s. And I keep getting this tap on the shoulder. There's more. There's something else for you. And I'm like, I'm really enjoying life right now. It's nice in California. So we started doing short-term mission trips to Mexico with the Lutheran Synod of Los Angeles, of that area. And we would go year after year, and I had a lot of opinions about it. I would say, well, what if we did it this way, or what if we did it that way? And JJ looked at me and he's like, if you think that it should be done differently, maybe you should be a leader. Maybe you should be doing it. So we started taking our own trips to Mexico to serve the poor. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to work toward justice. I wanted to make a long impact, not just a short impact, but that's hard when you just go short term. So finally, short term, I'm feeling like short term should become long term. And I think about this verse because it says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that would last. So the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. I knew that it had to be a life thing. I knew that I had to go for more than just a few weeks. I needed to go and actually give a portion of my entire life. So JJ and I sold everything we owned in Los Angeles. And what's interesting was he was ready first. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I said all this, yeah, but now that it's real, do I really want to do this? I had no idea what would lay ahead. We go to Mexico, we rent a place, and we figure it out. And we learn. And we have really high highs, and we have really low lows. And we learn about the brokenness, and we learn about systemic problems in a culture that continue to keep people poor. And we think, well, how can we change that? How can we work toward making it better? And in the process, another huge surprise comes along that if you had told me that this would happen, I would have laughed at you. But we met 5 kids in a children's home. And that was another big call in my life. And I knew that I was supposed to be their mom. I knew. And JJ was like, yeah, this feels right to me. So we decide to adopt 5 children so that they can stay together. And because I felt like I knew that God called me to do that. Well, I wasn't prepared for the next surprise, which was a baby. So then my 5 becomes 6. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I have a bicultural, bilingual, blended, different family? I live in Mexico, and JJ at this point is running Lantern Hill. And I have all these kids, and I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm not always that good at it. And I'm an A student. But sometimes life is not as easy as you think is going to be. And even if God calls you to do something, that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect at it. So I have 6 kids, and I'm living in Mexico. And it's around 2009, 2010, and people, the financial issues in the States are definitely affecting the rest of the world. People are not coming to Mexico. They're not necessarily supporting us as much. And we're living basically as broke missionaries. And I'm like, God, what am I doing here? I'm not making any kind of a difference. I'm a weight on the system. I was ashamed. Where is the fruit? And we got to a point where we literally had nothing left. We could not go running to the States because our kids did not have visas. We had made a commitment to be there. We lived in Mexico. There was no out. I still had so much more than the people that we were trying to serve in poverty. But another missionary family brought a van full of food to our house for my family. And I felt ashamed because I was supposed to be there helping other people. But I had to go through that darkness, that difficult time of understanding what need truly is. See, people in other countries that I've encountered, when you really understand need at a physical level, you understand the need for Jesus. Because we literally can't do it on our own. We have to be connected to the life, the blood, and the love of Jesus if we're going to really do something. So we go through the ups and the downs, and we're at the point where we have nothing left, and I'm ready to give up. And my husband says to me, just give me one more year. Just give me one more year. I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I want to go back to work. I'm going to get a job. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I cannot live in the stress anymore. He's like, just give me one more year. And so I did. And we went to a new community. And we finally weren't afraid to try what we had always wanted to try, which was an education program, where we would take kids out of the fields or working environments and put them back in school, figure out a way to financially support that, and help kids stay in school, because an education can break the cycle of poverty. And slowly but surely, when we made that next step into the new community, everything that we needed came to us. We had nothing left, and so we were literally starting from scratch. And my kids and JJ and I, we went to a one little room building, and we started an education program. And then we were given a building. And then all these people came out from the woodwork, and it was truly a miracle. Because JJ and I are fiery, feisty people. We are not perfect, which is why you know that it's God who did it through us. See, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the perfect tree. You can be a broken tree or you can be a tangled vine, and you can still bear fruit. We're called to bear fruit. We are called to serve the world. We are called to do something. Not because we have to, not because it's an earning salvation, but because we're called to love. When it all came together, there was a time when my husband said to me, I think I'm done being the leader, and I'm not sure how we want to move forward. And I knew that it was my time to sort of take the leading role and go forward. I was afraid because you know what? It's actually easier when someone else is in charge. You can blame everything on them. They get to deal with the big decisions. And I was afraid to be the leader. But guess what? It was my dream from the beginning. I had to take charge and be the leader of what God had called me to do from the time I was 19 years old. So we have a devotional book that a pastor that we know wrote some cool things from our organization, Lantern Hill, and I have a small part of it. And I just want to read to you how it sort of all ended up and where I came to be. And this is just a better way for me to say it. From a worldly perspective, it might have looked like we had gone backwards, but we had found home. This home is where we became a family with Ava and all of her kids, and with Yolanda and her grandkids, who we met on that hilltop at Maria's on the first day. It's where Pancho made the decision to leave the fields and go back to school. It's where Manuel came across the road to transform the building and to care for all of us. It's the home that Alma grew to become the director of our program and a great teacher. And the list goes on. It's where children come to be fed and can relax in a safe place outside their homes. It's where we celebrate the graduations each year as the students stay in school. And it's where I had to become the leader I needed to be for Lantern Hill when JJ passed me the torch to light my own lantern and to walk forward no matter how dark the road ahead may seem. Sometimes following a call is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's painful. But it's so worth it. And the growth that you have after, you look back and say, wow, that was a miracle, because I definitely could not have done that. But God can do things through you. So I encourage you today, whatever you are called to do, whatever little nudge you have inside of you, it does not matter how old you are. It does not matter how young you are. There are no excuses. To go out and to follow your call and to really live in that love. And sometimes you have to take a moment of patience and quiet and listening where God is pruning you because maybe it's not your time. But you will know when God will kind of push you forward. So thank you for listening to my story.